Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a recent executive order that's definitely stirring things up. It's all about accountability for former government officials. Think of it as a look at, well, trust, information, and how it all plays out in our political system.
Exactly. And this order focuses on two pretty specific situations that have been in the news quite a bit.
Right. So what are those two main areas?
Okay, first there's that letter from, I think it was 51 former intelligence officials. It came out just before the 2020 election.
Ah, the one about the reporting on President Biden's son's laptop.
That's the one. The order gets into claims it was politically motivated, potentially Russian disinformation, that sort of thing.
Okay, and the second situation?
The second involves former National Security Advisor John Bolton, specifically his memoir published after he left office and the handling of sensitive information in it.
Got it. So our mission today is basically to unpack this executive order, understand the concerns, the actions being taken, and what it all might signal about, government intelligence and us, the public.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with that letter. The 51 former intel officials. Remind us of the context again.
So this was literally in the final weeks of the 2020 election campaign. Very heated moment.
Yeah, I remember. Intense.
And the subject was the news reports about Hunter Biden's laptop. The core allegation, as laid out in this executive order, is that these officials worked with the Biden campaign.
To do what exactly?
To essentially discredit the story. The idea was to frame it as Russian disinformation.
And the order connects this to the CIA.
It does. It points out that the letter actually went through the CIA's own Pre-Publication Classification Review Board, PCRB. That's the standard process to check for classified info before something's published.
Interesting, so it was reviewed.
Apparently so. And the order also highlights that, well, many of the people who signed it still had active security clearances at the time. Some even had contractual relationships with the CIA.
Wow. Okay, so having a security clearance means you have access to classified stuff, right?
Correct. It's a position of trust.
So how does the executive order actually describe this action? It sounds like it takes a pretty strong stance.
Oh, definitely. It uses some very direct language. It says they willfully weaponized the gravitas of the intelligence community to manipulate the political process.
Well, weaponize the gravitas? That's quite a phrase.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It also calls the letter a fabrication of the imprimatur of the intelligence community, meant to suppress information essential to the American people.
So the fundamental worry expressed in the order is what? That former officials use their reputations to sway an election.
That seems to be the core concern. That and the potential damage to public trust in the intelligence community itself.
How so?
Well, the order argues that actions like these could make people think the IC, or at least former members, aren't impartial, that they might use their background for partisan politics. It explicitly says this has imperiled the faith Americans have in other intelligence professionals.
Right, the ones still working on national security day to day. And the order doesn't just make these claims, it takes action, right? It actually names names.
It does. Section 3 lists 50 living former intelligence officials whose current or active security clearances are to be revoked immediately.
50, wow. Are there any recognizable names on that list?
Oh, absolutely. You've got James Clapper, former Director of National Intelligence, Michael Hayden, former CIA and NSA Director, Leon Panetta, former CIA Director and Secretary of Defense, John Brennan, another former CIA Director.
Those are some very high-profile figures.
They are, and the list continues with many others who held significant positions. So this isn't just symbolic. Revoking clearances has real consequences.
Yeah, what kind of consequences?
It can limit their ability to do consulting work on national security matters, maybe hold certain advisory roles, things like that. It definitely sends a message.
A very clear message, it seems. Okay, let's switch gears to the other part of this order, John Bolton's memoir.
Right, so Bolton left the Trump administration in 2019. Then he published a book. The order makes a point of saying it was for monetary gain.
Okay, and the problem wasn't just that he wrote a book, obviously. What's the specific concern here?
The concern is about the content. The order alleges the memoir contained sensitive information drawn from his time in government.
Sensitive, but was it necessarily classified? The order seems careful with its wording there sometimes.
That's a good point. The order says his actions showed a reckless treatment of sensitive information and created a grave risk that classified material was publicly exposed. It doesn't definitively state what was classified, but it highlights the risk and the recklessness.
And the broader implication, according to the order.
The argument is that this kind of disclosure could undermine the willingness of advisors to give candid advice to future presidents. You know, the whole chilling effect idea.
Right. If you think your private conversations might end up in a tell-all book.
You might be less forthcoming. That's the concern raised.
And Bolton faces the same consequence as the others.
Yes. Section 3A50 specifies that John R. Bolton's current or active security clearance is also revoked, effective immediately.
So you've got these two quite different situations. One about alleged political interference using intel community credibility. The other about publishing sensitive information, but both resulting in clearance revocations.
Correct. It seems to tie back to perceived abuses of the trust associated with high-level government service and access to sensitive information.
Beyond these specific cases, does the order lay out any general principles or policies, like looking forward?
It does. Section 2 articulates 3 core policy statements. Think of them as guiding principles.
Okay, what are they?
First, it emphasizes that the intelligence community should not be involved in partisan politics or used for electioneering. Pretty straightforward.
Makes sense.
Second, it says people with security clearances shouldn't leverage that status to influence U.S. elections. Sort of a direct response to the letter situation, you could argue.
Yeah, seems like it. And the third?
The third policy point discourages publicly disclosing classified information in memoirs, particularly when it's done for personal profit. That seems aimed squarely at situations like the Bolton book.
So, stating the policy is one thing. How does the order actually plan to enforce this or follow up? You mentioned the immediate revocations.
Right, so Section 3 handles the implementation. Step 1 is the immediate revocation of those specific clearances by the Director of National Intelligence, working with the CIA Director.
Done. What's next?
Step 2 is a reporting requirement. Within 90 days, the DNI, again consulting with the CIA Director, has to give a report to the President.
90 days. What's supposed to be in that report?
A few key things. First, details on any other potentially inappropriate activity related to that 51 official's letter. So digging a bit deeper there.
Okay, looking for more.
Potentially. Second, it asks for recommendations, actual proposals on how to stop the IC or its affiliates from inappropriately influencing domestic elections going forward.
So, preventative measures for the future.
Exactly. And third, the report should recommend any further disciplinary actions, which could include more clearance terminations for anyone else found to have engaged in similar conduct.
So this could potentially widen. It's not necessarily over with just these 51 individuals.
That seems to be the implication. The report could lead to further actions or policy changes aimed at preventing repeats of these situations. It sets up a process for continued scrutiny.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've got this executive order targeting specific past actions, the intel official's letter, Bolton's book, with the immediate consequence of revoking security clearances.
Correct. 50 from the letter group plus Bolton.
And then there's this forward-looking piece, this 90-day report, tasked with finding out more, recommending preventative measures, and potentially suggesting further disciplinary action.
That sums it up well. It's both reactive and trying to be proactive.
The big themes running through all of this seem to be about trust, right?
Absolutely. Trust is central. Public trust in institutions like the intelligence community. Trust between presidents and their advisors. And fundamentally, trust in the integrity of the democratic process itself.
And the order argues that both perceived political manipulation and careless handling of sensitive info can seriously damage that trust.
That's the core argument being made, yes.
Wow. This deep dive really highlights some complex issues. It definitely makes you think about where those lines are drawn, between transparency, accountability, and national security, especially with former officials writing books or speaking out.
It's constant tension.
And it raises that question about responsibility. What obligations do people have even after they leave government service, particularly if they held positions of immense trust? It's certainly food for thought, thinking about the long-term impact of all this on how we view government and the information we get. Definitely something to keep mulling over.